Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today. I met her actually in an online Zoom meeting, and we were in a community kind of encouragement and hope. And she was so full of joy and life. And I was like, who is this woman? I need to know her. And so it's really fun. Last month, about a month ago, I went to a conference and she was at the conference. And so we got to meet in person, which was just so fun. And so Jenn Co, I'm so excited to introduce everyone to you. Jenn is an amazing woman. She's worn a lot of hats. She's been involved in many, many different industries. And so just has like a wealth of knowledge and also just connection with Jesus. And she has launched her own coaching and consulting organization called Beyond Consulting Co., which I love. I love that name. And so she's working with people all across the world. And I'm just, so excited to have you here. She's from Canada, which is where my friend Drake lives. And I think you're our first Canadian on the podcast. So thank you for representing this amazing nation to the north of us. And Jenn, is anything else you'd like to share with our listeners just about who you are, anything from your life?
Super random, but because I love helping people step into their dreams and actually living it out, I did something pretty brave a few months ago, and I've loved jazz all my life. I've never taken anything to do with jazz. So I basically went and auditioned to join a jazz ensemble, got accepted. And so now I'm learning all these things and I don't really know how to read notes. So welcome to my world. I am living out the things that I actually encourage and inspire people to do. It's like, hey, and I am having the time of my life. So random tidbit about me, love jazz, love vocals, love singing.
That's so amazing. I was like, is this jazz, like dance jazz or music jazz? So music. Have you always wanted to like do this since you were a little girl, or when did this dream come to mind?
That's a good question. I attended this thing called a Dream Culture Conference. That's it. Years and years ago. And one of the exercises they got us to do, which was like, what? Is we needed to write a list of 100 dreams. And I'm like, ugh. And what happened normally is that people stop at 20 because they're like, oh, is that a good dream, bad dream? I exercised that muscle, and I kind of just like forced myself to just write anything I wanted to see or an experience. And on that list, unbeknownst to my own head, I wrote down, would love to sing in a Black gospel choir. I want to sing solo for a Black gospel choir. And then there's something to do with jazz. And I looked at my handwriting, it was like, I didn't know and something in me opened up. So let's say 10 years ago, I just kind of owned it. I was like, born and raised in the Philippines, Asian, does not fit the context, but who cares?
Wow. I just love that. I feel like when I see people that are fully alive, and even the people that I interview on the podcast, they're people that are full of passion for something. And I feel like we're our fullest selves when we are dreaming and going after and taking risks. And so like I just love like that you're doing that. And even as you consult people, well, I guess this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I feel like pain holds us back. Like it's like we have to process through pain in order to get to a place where we can actually dream again. Do you work like with your clients through things like that, or any thoughts about like how to get back to a place of dreaming and even hope for the future? If that makes
That
sense.
is such a beautiful question, because I do have a lot of people ask me that, especially those who've known me before. And in a nutshell, a part of my story is I was very suicidal. I was clinically diagnosed as depressed twice, bulimic. Anyway, there was just a whole lot of darkness and insecurities. And so the pain part of that does not compute when people meet me now, because they think you're so full of life and hope, and your ability to access solutions and connections is like amazing. And I was like, if you knew me then, you would think this is a completely different person. So the answer to your question is yes, there is a process. And the reason why I feel I'm able to walk people through it is because I've had to go through it myself multiple times, and I don't feel that anymore. It's such a different part of my life, a different chapter of my life. And I think it's really, really crucial. Honestly, I just had a chat with a dear friend of mine last night, and so they're married with kids. I'm not yet married with kids, but it was just so interesting how it was so clear to me a number of the issues that were at hand is because their life or the way they express this, they just didn't have time to process their things. I'm like, yeah, that's really affecting everyone involved, which is because I recognize is what pain does, and I'll talk in a funny term, is everything takes up real estate. So a thought, a sentiment, or whatever. So pain takes up space inside. And I believe that the parts wherein dreams, come alive and take flight also need space. And so what happens is when there's so much pain and it is not processed, and some of it doesn't get resolved in terms of it would look nice if me and my this person that I haven't talked to would start talking, maybe not, like there's certain things I can't control, but the processing internally, if it isn't resolved, and again I know how to walk people through that, because I'm a pretty holistic in terms of just looking at life. Like there's the mental space, emotional space, spiritual, physical stuff, even financial, just looking at the whole picture, and little by little just empowering people to understand you're actually never stuck. And I can say that with full confidence because I've been there and I've felt the darkness and the pain, but being able to lean into it, and it brings up the whole topic of surrendering but also being proactive. I know it sounds really weird, but it's a both and I think some people, depending on where they're at with their capacity, sometimes just need a bit more of one or the other. And so it's just learning to gauge, like, hey, where am I? So this sounds really, really odd, but checking in with yourself. Right now I'm training a group of people to know how to hold space for themselves and others. And it's a weird concept, but I realize we just go through life and then we just get hit with stuff and we pick ourselves up and just, let's be strong and courageous for ourselves and other people. I'm like, yeah, but you're dying. And I'm thinking, like, if you keep getting ripped to shreds inside and you don't tend to it, there is that part of you that will scream and scream and scream and scream and scream because there is pain. And so, yeah, just being able to address that in a really kind, compassionate way allows us to tap into dreaming again. But it does take work. It does take work. There is no shortcut. But man, I am living, breathing proof that, to me, I'm like, wow, look at all the possibilities. And if you asked me 15 years ago, I could not see anything.
Wow, that's so profound and powerful. I feel like we do gain authority over the things that we walk through, and then that's how God redeems in so many ways. Like we're able to walk other people through those things. What, if you're comfortable sharing, like what was a process that you walked through just as you were navigating some of your own pain, and like what did it look like? How did you posture your heart? How were you proactive and surrendered? I'd love to hear just like what your journey was like.
Sure. I'll share just little bits and snippets of it. And that's something I've had to sit down with myself because I realize something that I've gone through that is now quite normal and quick for me. Like if I get triggered or something sets me off, I'm really, really quick to recognize, okay, I'm triggered. And I actually know what happens to my brain when it's flooded with, certain chemicals, just keeping it really simple for your listeners. And that shuts certain things down. So being able to breathe and do certain exercises helps. But the thing that I realized is when I was in distress, I actually had to brainwash myself. I know it sounds like a weird term, because I believed in a lot of things. I believed that there was no hope. I believed that I was a victim to my circumstances and what I went through, what I didn't have, and I blamed everything and everyone, and I just didn't take personal responsibility. So I think that played a huge role of recognizing, like, oh, I have a part to play here. No matter what life has thrown at me, how many lemons are squished upon my court right now, I actually have a choice to keep sitting in it or wallowing in it or stand up. And what helped me, if I can be really, really vulnerable and candid, is recognizing that I needed help. um, and with that being said, the proactive part was I actually reached out. And even in the places of shame where it's like, oh my goodness, for a long time I've tried to put up this front that I'm capable, because I'm really high functioning and people know me. I produce a lot of things. I'm a pioneer. And it just got to the point I'm like, I don't know how to do life. And so I reached out. I reached out to counselors. I reached out to people who, here's the key thing. I reached out to people who I saw were doing it well. I know some people, they call their friends who are in the same space, and that's not very helpful. And that takes courage to actually go up to someone, whether it's, a government entity or whatnot. It's like, hey, I need help. And recognizing that's actually a process. And so I just reminded myself, there were seasons in my life, Lauren, I literally would just, and it's now a practice because I do this every night. So every night I scan my day and I find 3 things that I can celebrate. But that came out of those deep, dark places of pain. And because there was this thing in me, it was either all or nothing. I began to train myself to recognize that I am actually moving to health. And that takes a journey. And so starting to do things that I didn't feel like doing, AKA go for a walk every day. I am even not joking. I lived in Minnesota for 6 months. Some friends flew me in the dead of winter, didn't know anyone there. And I knew I needed to keep walking every day. And I'm the only person on the road because it's like a blizzard. But something in me is like, I will live and not die. Something just rose up in me. And even though I didn't have friends, and this has been like a recurring story of my life, it's no longer that. But I came to a point constantly where I'm alone. I don't have the support system that I'd like. But I began understanding, I said, God, if you said that if we call upon the name of the Lord, that you will save us. And I began digging in and understanding, what does that word save mean? What does the word call mean? How do I position myself? I began to just dig, and literally brainwash myself. And I created lists of declarations, and I didn't believe any of it. But I would force myself to pretend that I believed it. So when I would say things like, my forward movement parts Red Seas, I'm like, I literally would stand up, force my body to get excited. And what that does is it starts shifting things and creating new neural pathways without getting too clinical. And I realized, like, I'm actually creating a new way of thinking and moving, so that now when things hit me, I mean, that rut has already been created. It's so much easier. And so there are a lot of practical things I learned to do no matter what the season, like breath work. It sounds really odd, but regulating my own breathing and recognizing I can actually bring myself up to a state of energy or calm myself down. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. I don't have to wait for a counselor. I don't have to wait to be in a church service. I don't even have to put worship music on for that part of the practice, for example, but it's habits and creating rhythms and structures for yourself that now give me so much more leverage to be like, okay, because this thing is okay now, and I've done it day in and day out, and that means I have more space to run. So I don't know, does that answer a little bit of your question?
Yes. No, that's beautiful. It's really fascinating because I think in our culture we're so instant gratification, and you can even see this in our like faith. Sometimes we're like miracles, like fast, change, which is beautiful, and yes, it happens. But it sounds like yours has been a long process in building habits and building, processes in your own life. That now you're like literally you've retrained your brain, so your brain's thinking differently, and then life is different, right? But it sounds like it's been a process.
It has been. And I remember being in an environment, I went to the school and they would call people up with testimonies. And I remember sitting there and being like, how come no one talks about today? I chose to have this thought. Yesterday I did that too. And last week. And I think it kind of nagged at me a little bit, and I was just like, I want to create platforms wherein we do both. There is that beautiful thing of God miraculously, like literally this morning I was listening to something, and someone who was born deaf, no, born deaf, born blind, one of the two, for 35 years, born, literally started seeing or hearing. I was just like, what the heck is that? To like, um, and also recognizing we celebrate that, but then I now am able to think that's probably jarring for that person who received that miraculous healing, you know? And so there's layers to this that I'm able to kind of walk around the elephant, so to speak, and recognize one aspect is this, but this part of their life and their friends. And I mean, it's a lot to unpack, and just recognize it's okay. God's in the room and he's so patient to walk us through things. And the key thing is no matter what it is we're after, I've not just tasted, I've really feasted on the truth that that God's really, really relaxed about everything, even though we wish he would speed a lot of stuff up. And as I began to kind of sink into that part of his nature, I've become more relaxed into things, and trusting he has a timing and a process. That doesn't mean I just sit on my bum. Like if I hear, okay, that really resonates with me, this word that's over my life, I know how to partner with him now. And then I literally pat myself on the back, like, well done, Jen. Like, oh, you fell, you skinned yourself, or that person didn't understand you, and you tried to, sit with them, and it just went sideways. I'm like, well done. So all that to say, I've become my biggest cheerleader. And that was a key thing for me too, because I was looking for external validation, external support. And again, that's really important. But it got to the point that I began to fill my own cup. I'm like, that's something I can control. So I'm gonna encourage Jen.
That's so powerful. As you've been talking, I've just been thinking about, I know all of these really high capacity people, especially women. There's a lot of women in my life, and I'm like, wow, you guys are just amazing, and you're killing it in your work and just thriving. But there's like this, I think that's what it is. There's also this crazy internal critic, or, external critic maybe. And so I just love that you've like overcome that, and you're like literally partnering with the love of God like over you, and that he is pleased with you, regardless of what you do. Obviously you've accomplished a lot in your life, but I think that is I don't know, that's transformative.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
stole this exercise from, I call them one of my fathers. They're a pretty well-known leader in circles, and I remember this story about him telling his PA or his assistant to stop all the calls for the next 5 minutes, and he goes back into his office, and he literally just like closes his eyes, puts his hand out, and just whispers or mutters under his breath, here I am, the object of your affection. And he just sits there. And when I first heard that, I was like, I want to start doing that. And I would do it when so back in the day when I'd get stressed, or like I'm working on something and I felt like I'm hitting a wall. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna practice that. But now it's become so normal for me that I play this game. I play lots of games with God. It's just the way it is. It's like, he's actually really fun and playful. And sometimes I'm like, how come you don't know this part of him? Oh, but I have a game with God wherein it's called How Fast Can I Get to the Secret Place? And what I do, and it's connected with that exercise of just literally feeling emotionally the affection of God for me, regardless of what's happening, is I could be by myself, I could be on a walk, I could be in a grocery store, I could be the best things at the best moments are when I'm in this big gala event, or like there's so many people, and I'll just have this thought. It's like, oh, let's see how quick I can get to the secret place. And things are happening around. And because I've trained myself to access that space, and in the past, it took like months. I'm not even joking. I was like, oh, it took work. Laboring into rest is actually work. But then when you do it and you maintain it, when I'm at a party, I literally will just like stop, like pause for 2 seconds and then just like I do something like put my hand in my heart, or just like imagine myself like I'm the object of God's affections, and literally, I'm not joking, 2 seconds I'm there. Like even as I'm talking to you, I'm doing it, and I'm like, wow. And I feel like that anchoring point is sometimes what gets lost in all the shuffling and the hustling, which I tell a lot of people, clients, myself, I don't hustle. Like God doesn't hustle. So I don't know why we value certain things. So what I do now is I question certain statements that we fling around, even in the Christian context. I'm like, I don't know, is that really biblical or helpful? And what I've done now is I asked, what do you think about that? Like, that sounds really nice. And God would start to unpack it with me. And I'm like, oh, okay, not doing that no more. And so it's just the openness of having constant dialogue with the Lord, and sometimes just constant silence, and being really content with being with. And that's one word that has been over my life for a few decades now. It's the word with. And I camped out on that for a long time. I was like, why is the name Emmanuel the first name you told the shepherds? And I just began like understanding, it's like, wow, there's something about us as humans knowing that you're actually with us, the withness of God. So I don't know, I'm not creating a new theology, but it's just something that I've been sitting on for a long time. Like, oh, you're actually here with me. If my friends get news of like my aunt is battling like cancer again, and my mom contacted me just in tears, and it's so weird when these moments happen. It's like this thin place. I experience this thin place, and there's like this, it's so palpable to me, like this peace. And I'm like, oh, it's not that I stepped out of it, it just becomes so thin. And when things like this happen, I'm like, whoa, you're here. And what happens is, like, as I speak, and even in my silence, like I recognize the strength of the presence of God gets to flood someone else, even on a phone, even on a Zoom call. It's because I've created like a home for the Lord. And it doesn't matter whether it's a business issue or a relationship issue or whatever. I was like, you're actually with me. And my goodness, like that is super comforting. It's also super empowering. It's also super like joyful, like all the things. And so I've just learned to kind of cultivate, like, how do you make this your life, your lifestyle? So that's a practical thing. And some people think like, how does that really relate to my business? I'm like, well, let's just experience it together. And literally on a call, I will walk them through either an encounter, or we'll just like, I'll teach them. It's like, do some breathing. They're like, this is so weird. I'm like, trust me, you will access spaces internally and in the spirit because you've learned to be still and know that he is God.
Wow, that's so powerful. Two things caught my attention from what you shared. I feel like this is a season of we're learning how to abide, like as a people. And I think it's actually abiding in the love, like abiding in our belovedness, abiding and staying in that for whatever is going on around us. But how I just love how you've cultivated this where you can access that wherever you are. And then second thing, if someone is like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is like, I want a relationship with Jesus, but I don't know like how to, wherever I am, access this. Like, what would you say to someone just starting that journey? Any like, what did it look like for you? And yeah, how do you literally, I mean, it's kind of like you practiced it, it sounds like,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do people do it?
What was your question again?
Like, how do people access this like space, or like almost like connecting back to the vine, or whatever it looks like? You call that your secret place. If someone's, yeah, just wanting to practice that connection with God, like how practically do they do that?
Multiple ways, but the first thing that came to my mind, so I'll just run with this, is I asked Jesus questions, or he paints something for me. But to access that, sometimes we have to trip our own brain. Basically, to me, conversation with God, or even with ourselves, that's how we get to step into someone's shoes or mindset, right? And so the first thing that came to my mind, if someone were to come to me is like, wow, Jen, I have no grid for this, I'd be like, that's great. Like, and I'll affirm them, be like, oh, wow, like I love that you're curious and interested. So it's not like making it super heavy. I said, well, do you want to do like a fun game with me right now? Like, and they're like, wait, what? And I've done this honestly with people. I was like, yeah, so you can close your eyes, you don't have to close your eyes, but I think it helps to close because then distractions are like, okay, fine. And so I literally will ask Jesus a question. So the first question that came into my mind while you were talking was, um, I do this. It's like, hey Jesus, if you want to meet with me anywhere, where would you want to meet me? And then I literally walked someone through this recently, and I was like, don't think, just first thing that comes to your mind. They're like, I'm like, you don't have to figure it out. I'm here. And they'll
Wow.
start, and then I'll just walk them through it. And then like it depends on what we're going after, but in the moment they're just like, that's so weird. I'm like, awesome. And then I check in with Holy Spirit. Again, my faith isn't in the fact that they hear. I know everyone hears. My faith in this fact is based on the fact that God wants to be heard. Like he loves to reveal himself. So it's always usually putting it back, putting the onus and the weight back on his love for us. And I have not met anyone that I've done that sort of kind of like journey with, wherein they're like, whoa, that was so trippy. I'm like, I know, right? And then it allows them to play because they think the imagination's wrong and real, or like, or not real. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, God loves to speak through symbols. And sometimes he brings us on this journey, and it's like this conversation that makes you curious. So you keep asking him. So that's been so fun for people who know or don't know God. Like I'd be like, if they're like, well, I don't believe in God, I'm like, no, in my head I was like, no problem, he believes in you. But I was like, no worries, but what would perfect love say? Or what would a really good dad, what would he give you as a gift? And literally people are like, oh, like there's this clear connection. I'm just like, and sometimes I just laugh. I'm like, you're already hearing his voice. So just for like yourself, Lauren, I have such a, not just a passion, but I want people to literally encounter and experience God. And there's no way you can teach till the cows come home. But to me, I have the greatest joy of just letting them like experience him himself, and then coming out of it and being like, wait, what just happened? I'm like, well, we can talk about that. But you can't, they can't refute that didn't happen to them, because their hearts have been touched. And more often than not, people end up weeping. They're like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, that means something in you is like God speaking to something deep. And they're like, yeah, it's so fun.
I love how your posture is like curiosity in like a game, because
Yeah.
I encounter like whenever I encounter Jesus, he's hilarious and so fun. And so it's such a I don't know, I guess I work a lot with young adults and they're like, I need to hear God's voice, like a lot of pressure. And so I love how you said, no, it's on God. Like he wants to connect, he wants to reveal his, like he will find a way to do that. And um but I love that it's like this curious posture of like play and no pressure.
Yeah.
It's, you said like he's relaxed.
Gosh. There was this
Yeah.
one guy, he's like 22. And yeah, I noticed that with young adults, this is quite the norm of this, like, this is what we've been told. We need to do this and do that. And literally, I literally would sometimes sit with these young adults and put my hand on their shoulders, and then I like look them in the eye with a smile on my face. I'm like, and I'll just say, pressure is off you. And I literally remember this one person just breaking down crying. It's like they were like so scrunched up, like, I need to hear God. I need to hear him. Like, I'm like, oh, you are and you will. And it's just that tightly coiled. I have visuals sometimes of like when you wring something so much, there's no space for water or anything. You gotta just like lay it out. And I think to me that is a key word that generation needs to hear. It's like it's really a lot of the effort and the pressure is on God, and he already did it. But for you to experience it, um it's not as hard as you think.
Oh, when you said pressure is off, I just felt something like so deep. Would you, just as we close, pray a prayer or say a word, just inviting people into that truth?
Oh, I love that. Ah, hmm. I just want to say to you, those who are listening, that you are so ridiculously unequivocally, like you can't do anything about it, loved. um and so to some of you that are frustrated with that because you feel like you have to do something, work something, I'm like, too bad, so sad. You're already loved, and there really is nothing you can do about it except maybe receive a little bit more. So I release the grace upon all of us, because I need it. I need it. I release the grace for us to allow God to let him love us, and to love us really, really well. And pressure is off of you to figure it all out, to do 10 things right, and read the Bible a certain way, and go to that conference or get prayer from someone. I'm like, pressure is off of you. It's like, I release, gosh, like the God of everything. It's such a boggling thought. Actually chose you to be a landing pad and a resting place and a living room. And I can honestly hear the laughter of heaven. It's like this joyful being like, come and just experience the lightness of who we are. And so I just release lightness. And I mean that as a play on words. So places where it's felt you couldn't see and it's been dark, or even the heaviness of it, I just declare it is so light. It is so light. And you're gonna walk away from listening to this recording just feeling a little lightheaded and giddy, and I give you full permission to milk that and not stop and be like, oh, I need to be a serious person and really go after God. It's like, you can, the weird thing is you are able to access that stuff a lot easier, and with so much more ease, because of the lightness that God's actually releasing upon you. So I'm so excited to hear stories that would come out from this, because it is a true revelation that when God created light, he made it for multiple purposes, and you just have to show up and just receive. I'm going to end with this phrase that one of my mamas would say: we are the great responders, because he started it all. And we literally just respond to his love, respond to his invitation, respond to the work that he's already done on our behalf. And we just get to be like, oh, cool. Thanks. Amen.
Amen. Oh, Jenn, thank you so much for just bringing the fullness of who you are. You carry his light and his joy so beautifully. Thank you for sharing your heart with us today.
You're welcome.